Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm Helena, and we both work at the MS Trust, a UK charity for people affected by multiple sclerosis. And we're here to help you make sense of MS.
Yeah, and today Helena and I are very excited because we're trying something a little bit different on our podcast today. We've got 3 podcast guests all at once, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about how MS is perceived in the world of media.
So why this topic, you might ask? Well, here at the MS Trust, we often see people's frustration with how MS is portrayed in the media. And there's sort of generally 2 different types of stories that the media likes to tell. And it tends to be the sort of very doom and gloom, hard stories to read, or it's about people with MS doing remarkable things like climbing mountains or running ultra races and jumping out of airplanes.
Yeah, absolutely, Helena. And sometimes we've heard from people who we speak to in the MS community that this can be quite frustrating because it doesn't really show a fair picture of what MS is like or what living with MS is really like. So we've got MS Awareness Week coming up at the end of April, and often the MS community will ask us, why don't we see more of MS in the media? Why don't we see more people with MS on TV or represented in TV shows? So recently we've had a few guests, some stories from journalists, from TV presenters. And so we thought, why not get all of these people together in one room and see what their thoughts were on the subject.
And our 3 guests, as Nick mentioned, they're really varied backgrounds. So we got TV presenters, somebody who's been doing a lot of medical writing, to a series, a video series about the wellness industry. So it's a varied mix. I'm really looking forward to this one. So without any further ado, I think we should just jump into it.
So we're very lucky today to be joined by 3 guests on our podcast this afternoon. So I think if I could have each guest introduce themselves and then just say what their connection is to MS. So Daph, could we please start with yourself? Could you tell us who you are and your connection to MS?
Yeah, good afternoon, pnawn da to everyone. My name is Dav Wyn, or David Wynrys if you want to be formal and posh, like my passport says. But I work as a presenter on S4C, which is the Welsh language channel here in Wales, based in Cardiff. And I was diagnosed with remitting relapsing MS in 2021. And here I am now.
Amazing. Big welcome to Daph. And then Rachel, please, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about MS and your connection with it?
Sure. My name is Rachel Horne. I'm originally Canadian, but I've lived in the UK for about 30 years. I'm a trained journalist, and I've had MS for the past 13 years. And I write about MS from a patient viewpoint, but I'm also a co-author on quite a few scientific papers with MS neurologists, about MS.
Brilliant. Amazing. Big welcome to you, Rachel. And then finally, Richard, if you could do the same for us, please.
Yes, hi, my name is Richard Sprenger. I am a video journalist at The Guardian, and I have had MS since 2015.
Big welcome to yourself, Richard, and to all of our guests this afternoon.
Before we start off and talk about MS in the media, maybe just a really sort of quick little introduction from everyone as well. How did you get into sort of start working in the world of media? Should we do the same order, maybe, Duff?
Well, I sort of fell into it. I was about to finish university and I'd had a place to do teachers training. But at the time I was part of some friends from home, 5 of us as boys. We used to go around singing in different places, and we were singing in one concert and they didn't have a compere. So I kind of just took over and did the comparing for that concert ad hoc last minute. And the person who was sort of the president of the night was my now boss, who was head of a television company here in Llanelli in West Wales, and kind of saw that I was quite confident speaking in front of people, didn't mind doing it, and sort of said, do you want to come over and have a quick chat in the office? Didn't know I was going to have a chat to basically talk about a job. And then I was offered a job as a roving reporter then for the, so we have 2 live magazine programs on SBC every day. I suppose if you had to compare, they'd be sort of like the one show runs on at 7 o'clock at night and the others on between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. So yeah, started as a roving reporter, and then I sort of do studio presenting now as well. So fell into it, although I think I would have been a terrible teacher. So I'm glad I didn't do teachers training in the end. So that's how I got into it.
Fantastic. And well, Nick used to be a teacher as well before he came and joined so we've got former teachers.
Yes, we form an alliance staff. Absolutely. Yeah.
And how about yourself, Rachel?
Okay, I'm a little bit different. I always wanted to be a journalist. That was it. And so after university, I actually went to China, to Beijing in the late 80s, because I figured I had a lot more chance of being able to, to write and sort of sell my stories from there. So I did that for 2 years and, covered the Tiananmen Square massacre and demonstrations. And then I did my master's at Columbia University at the School of Journalism. And then I moved to London, and I worked as a producer and a writer for CNN for the business news. And then there was a long period where I, had my kids, didn't do any journalism, then got MS, and then slowly started writing about MS and medicine and science.
That's very, very interesting. Quite different journeys.
Yes, I know.
And how about yourself, Richard?
I did television production at university, which was a bit of a Mickey Mouse degree at the time. It was great fun, unlike most university courses, I believe. And actually, I started working in radio after that. So, but I missed the visual side of sort of storytelling, and so I kind of went into web video, I suppose, because I didn't really fancy working on sort of pet rescue holding a boom microphone for 10 years or so. I wanted to I wanted to make my own videos and be sort of more in charge of kind of the whole process, I suppose, and move on to the next project quickly, and all that web video is good at. So so I'm a video producer really by trade, and I've only started calling myself a journalist of any kind of recently, I suppose, because I think that's what has happened.
Fantastic. And as I outed Nick of being a former teacher, I'll put my hand up to also having one of those Mickey Mouse degrees. That's what I did at university. It was great fun, but sometimes you did wonder a little bit about what am I can I have this much fun at university? And I guess the answer was yes.
So I mean, we've got three prominent media people here with very different backgrounds and journeys to get here, but thinking about where you are at the moment and having MS, do you find that there are any challenges or potentially opportunities that brings with it? I wonder if I could maybe change the order up a bit here and ask Rachel first.
I think things have got there's many more opportunities. I think people who have a disability or chronic illness in the media, because I think there has been a shift towards, we know there's about, 1/5 of the world have some sort of disability. So I think there's been an opening of that. So I think that is really good. They want to hear our stories, which is great. On the flip side, I think there are certain aspects, certain strands of the media that do see disabled people as still wanting to very much, silence or sometimes even stigmatize disabled people. So there is that kind of constant sort of pushing back. As far as challenges, again, I'd be interested to hear from the other guests, but I find some of it is just physical challenges. I get tired more often. So it just takes me longer to write things. And also, I think the people I'm interviewing who have MS, it's also a bit of a challenge. We will all recognize it with MS. We're not always on the ball, getting the best out of people. I sometimes also think, and dealing with various, how long they are in their MS journey, getting them at their best and getting them, as I said, getting the most of so that everybody's happy with what we've got.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I guess lots of the people who you work with or create content for are people with MS. So it's really interesting to see how challenges that are associated with that. Thank you, Rachel. And Richard, how do you feel about that question?
I mean, when I started working at the Guardian, I didn't have or didn't know I had MS, so I started kind of in a role that my role has developed basically since my diagnosis, and it's changed, and I've been lucky, I suppose, that I've been able to adjust to sort of incorporate the physical challenges that I have. So previously I would be sort of running around with a video camera, filming, coming back to the office, editing. Sometimes you go into the office not knowing where you might be sent that day, that sort of thing, which is not something that I would be able to do now. And it just happened that as a similar sort of time as I was sort of thinking, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this running around with a video camera for too much longer, my boss at the time suggested I try and do sort of on-screen stuff, which was great because I really didn't want to end up, I do editing as well, and I didn't want to just sort of sitting in a dark room all the time. I really enjoyed getting out and about and meeting people. So it's been a kind of an opportunity for me, because I've been able to kind of adjust the work that I've been doing, and I'm not able to do the camera stuff, which I did enjoy doing, but now I get to do a different thing, which I also enjoy doing. And I don't know that that's a particularly common sort of way of it working, but I agree that times are changing around kind of and representation is obviously important, and getting a diverse range of voices and a diverse sort of life experience is deemed very important nowadays. And I don't know that I particularly had a particularly diverse life experience before I got MS. I mean, I had a fairly sort of, what I would assume was a fairly sort of standard background. So it's kind of it's been interesting to find a different string to my bow, and a different kind of thing to say, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like you've kind of learned some new skills, I guess, and kind of been the opportunities have kind of changed for you. But yeah, no, it's really interesting. Definitely important to have that broad, diverse range of voices, isn't it, within the media? So could I please pass to Daff?
I think my answer is going to be pretty much copy and paste between Rachel and Richard's, because I agree with everything they've said. But for me personally, I think the opportunities far outweigh the challenges. I'm quite new to the MS journey. I've only had it officially diagnosed for about 2 years now. But we live in a time in which there's so much more social media, so much more opportunities to give your story out there and do that in a positive manner. Also, we live in a time, luckily, where there are more treatments. It's more possible now to live well and better and longer with MS. So I think getting those out there, and my experience of that so far is that. And I've been quite strict with myself in terms of the places I get my information from. So MS Trust, MS Society, Shift MS, I haven't gone beyond that, or NHS. So I think those are lucky that I have those now at my disposal in 2023, although I understand it's different for people diagnosed years and years and years ago. Challenges personally, as I say, I'm still new to the MS journey, so I'm still trying to work out what my triggers are, what causes it. One thing I have learned is that long journeys as a passenger or on windy roads is a trigger for me. I went up to Aberystwyth, if any of you familiar with Wales, it's sort of mid-Wales. I was filming up there on Friday, drove myself up, windy roads all the way from Cardiff, and I got home and I thought, oh, I don't feel very well. And then on Saturday, then I was a bit more lethargic, fatigued, bit not me. And I thought, okay, that's my challenge. I need to tell the producers, right, I don't think I can go there, or at least I need more time to go there. It's all about sort of learning what you can do with your job. Like you said, Richard, you may not be on the camera so much more now, but you've adjusted. And for me, it's just a matter of learning what's possible and adjusting to that. But yeah, definitely opportunities far outweigh challenges for me personally.
A big frustration, I would say personally, I don't know, is if I'm sort of filming for a day, by the end of the day, I'm kind of really struggling to kind of think straight and to kind of have the energy to, and you might not have got what you want. You might still need some good stuff. And I had a shoot recently where I was just like, you know what, I could really do with starting again in the morning, but it's sort of 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I've got stuff to do.
I don't know about you two, but brain fog is a big thing for me, especially if you're out doing a live OB. I'm thinking, oh, what was I going to say next now? I've just planned it. I just recited it in my head, and the next thing I can't remember it. So brain fog for me has become much more of a thing, which is annoying, but I don't really know how you'd adapt or change that, really. Richard, do you have any tips?
No, I know exactly
Helena?
what you mean, but I'm listening to both of you and thank God I'm not like an on camera, because I think both of you kind of have to be there. You probably got a crew around you. You know, you are on, and that's your time slot. Whereas me, because I think I'm much more print, I can kind of, you know, take a break, wander around. I don't have to be on, and I can do it, you know, go over stuff, say, you know, in the morning, or I can say, oh, you know what, I'm going to have a break and I'll go after that in the, you know, later on in the day. So I think I have got quite a bit more flexibility than you, as you said, because you've got people relying on you, haven't you? You booked your shoot or whatever. You know, you have to go ahead and you have to do it, and you have to put, you know, or try and put everything on that, you know, on that day, which I can imagine is pretty tough.
I would definitely recommend working with a sympathetic editor to get around these issues. Fortunately, we can cut out all the bits which
Yes
aren't pretty.
I agree with you on that one.
I think we have similar issues when we are recording the podcast, when it's just me and Nick recording our bits. If we ever do the silly mistake of sort of scheduling the recording towards the end of the day, and I'm just a mess by then, going blah. So there's a lot of retakes. But yeah, it's that balance of finding like when is the best time, what can we do, and having sympathetic colleagues definitely helps. Right, moving on to a bit where we sort of wanted to talk about it for this podcast, really. How do you feel that people with disability, or people with MS specifically, are represented in the media? And I guess that's sort of both in press and on TV, and I guess also what I'd like to know a little bit is, like, has it changed from, say, when you were growing up and you saw it, and to what it is today? Who am I going to start with? I'm looking at you, Richard.
I mean, there's not, I don't know that there's a huge amount of representation out there, and traditionally it was always that sort of people with, I'm talking perhaps with disabilities more generally, as sort of to be sort of pitied and sort of be a bit sad and that sort of thing. And then I think perhaps led by the Olympics, the Paralympics in London, there was this sort of big swell of kind of treating disabled people as sort of superhuman heroes or something, which is sort of right at the other end of the scale. And I think, I guess I'd like to think that maybe it's a bit more nuanced now, and or maybe we're getting towards a place where it's a bit more nuanced, because I mean, even MS on its own is such a varied illness, and there, you know, there's the sort of cliche that no two cases are alike, but when you look at the entire disability spectrum, it's so broad and just encapsulates so many things that it's very hard to sort of speak about it as one thing, you know?
Yeah. I think we definitely see that sort of divide of superhero versus doom and gloom stories when we publish things. You either get people that complain about one or the other. We try to have a very varied thing, but I think if we ever post stories that are from the sort of the bigger press, it tends to be those two stories that mostly get the attention of the sort of the outside media. How about yourself, Duff?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with a lot of what Richard is saying. I've got this question written down here, and I've just put as an answer, not very well. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I just think there's a lot of referring to MS historically, which is important because it shows how much things have developed, how people now live with MS. But when I was told that I had, sort of provisionally told I had MS, I went to bawling my eyes out. I thought, oh my gosh, my first question immediately to the consultant was, when am I going to die? Because I imagined myself being in a wheelchair. And that, of course, is the reality for many, many people. But I went straight there and I thought, I wouldn't be able to tend to myself, and I would die within a few years. But I was put straight immediately and said, no, 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 we expect people to die with MS, not because of MS. Now, going back to my original point, it's of course so important to look at the history of MS and what it was, but I don't think there is enough of how it is now, and that it is possible to live well with a lot of disabilities. There are things out there, obviously we have to be sympathetic that it's not true for everyone, but overall I don't think is represented very well, especially with social media and things like that at our fingertips. Literally, there's so much more that can be done, should be done, and it's difficult because there are so many other chronic illnesses, there are so many other things. Who gets to fight to get that, point across? But I think there needs to be sort of a rebrand of MS in some way or another, but also being sympathetic to everyone who has MS and every disability going. It's a hard one because, as you said, Richard, it's a snowflake disease. They call it a snowflake disease. It impacts on everyone so differently. It's kind of finding that balance of how to do it well and represent everyone at the same time. I hope that makes sense. I tend to go round in circles because of my brain fog.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. It's really hard to sort of think that there would be like the one face of MS. I mean, you do get some conditions like where there has been a celebrity that comes out and then everybody says, well, that's the face of this condition, but there's never really been anything like that for MS.
I think it was I'm a Celeb last year or the year before. Kadina Cox, the Paralympian, was a contestant, and she came out. She says she has MS, and she's a great advocate for MS. You can do things, you can win Paralympic medals, and I think more of that is needed, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Rachel? Same question.
Yeah, I think I'm slightly in a different position, maybe because I'm older and I've had it for longer. So I think when I was growing up, you just didn't really see disabled people around. You didn't see them in wheelchairs, and now of course there's mobility scooters. So I think that's fantastic in a way that we're all sharing the same space with people who are disabled, and that's exactly how it should be. They should have the same opportunities, that kind of thing. I think maybe that I tend to be aware, exactly as you said, that, as has been pointed out, the difficulty with MS and coming to terms sort of and seeing it is there's such variances. And I'm sure you'll meet people who've had MS for years and you have absolutely no idea that they've got the disease, whereas you'll meet somebody who's been with it with a short period of time, but just because of absolutely bad luck, they're quite severely disabled. So I think it's absolutely fantastic that we've got these treatments since 1996, and as David was pointing out, we're seeing this, people living longer and better lives. But I'm also, maybe because I'm older cohort, I see people who didn't have the benefit of those treatments. And still they are, they're quite severely disabled. There's nothing for them, and thankfully, it's not everybody. So I agree. It's a really hard juggling act, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I think you have to be sympathetic to the plethora of everyone. So look at the historical and look at today and be sympathetic to everything and everyone, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
And I suppose also when it is for the media outlets to choose stories that they publicize as well, it tends to be, we were saying about the superhero stories or the doom and gloom stories, the people who are just sort of getting on with the day-to-day life struggles that we like to talk about and we like to sort of emphasize with, because that's our life. They don't really tend to get that much of an outing, really.
Well, we always pick up on extremes, don't we? And so anything that goes for not just sort of disability coverage, but all sorts of things. And so anything that's sort of roughly in the middle is perhaps not quite as interesting.
Yeah.
To the wider audience. I don't know how you change that, because I think there's really interesting nuances in all sorts of stories, but if your headline isn't going to sell it to a lot of people and no one's going to watch it, then it makes it a bit tricky, which is a shame.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I guess all of you have touched upon this a little bit with your answers there, but thinking about maybe what's not happening in media at the moment, is there anything that you would like to see more of in relation to MS? For example, more awareness, or as you said, I guess, Richard, what you were talking about, there's kind of a cultural shift, isn't it? I wonder if I could come back to you to see if there's anything else that you'd like to see.
I just don't know how it. I don't know. I struggled not to get a little bit kind of downbeat about it, because I think that I do find that you struggle to sort of find a wider audience. Obviously, people who are naturally interested in this stuff. If someone has MS, there's a good chance they'll be interested in the story about MS. But trying to attract kind of a wider kind of cross section of the country, or a potential audience, to something that is quite niche, because a lot of people don't have experience of it, and I probably didn't have much particular interest in it myself before I got it, and then suddenly it was like, oh, this is interesting. I kind of try and be sort of realistic about how these sort of changes might happen. I would love to tell sort of more stories about not just MS, but sort of disability more generally. But disability, I think, it's a really hard thing to get an audience for, and it's a really hard thing to kind of it's difficult. It's sort of not a sexy kind of minority, I suppose, is what I'm sort of clutching at, and it would be good if that could be changed through good journalism, but I don't know.
It's very interesting what you said there, because many years ago, I remember being at some fundraising event, and there were people talking about different conditions, and how things, if you put up a sad picture of a puppy, people will donate money, and they just said, well, MS is not a sexy condition. And I remember that stuck with me, because I thought, well, hang on a second. But yeah, again, it's
a poor choice of word, because but it's you know what I mean. It's a sort of it's very difficult, and it's because a lot of people, they don't have actually any symptoms that you would notice, and I think that's a really difficult thing to tell people about as well, because if it's so internalized, and particularly if you're working in video and you want to show as much as possible, if there's nothing to show, then how do you tell the story in a way that's engaging?
Absolutely, and it's that invisible illness, isn't it, that a lot of people talk about. What about yourself, Rachel? Is there anything that you'd like to see more of in mainstream media and social media?
No, I very much agree. It's so difficult, isn't it, with a disease which usually in its earlier stages is invisible. So that's why, sort of, Richard, when you did your series, I hate to say it, but I was really pleased when you were sort of shots of you walking. I know it sounds an awful thing to say, but it's like, well, hang on, because if you look right now, or at all of us, we all look perfectly, don't we, perfectly well or able-bodied, but it's very difficult to capture invisibility. Okay, I'm going to be a bit of a downer here, but what I would like to see more of is and again, I think one of the questions was about be it in a documentary or whatever, is I think a lot of women with MS is much more higher incidence of domestic violence. So I would like to see more of that, even though I think it's absolutely not a feel-good story, it's a feel-bad story. But I think it's something like the awareness, if you are disabled, you're much more vulnerable. And not just economically vulnerable, but you're psychologically. I don't know about the rest of you, but I found having a diagnosis of MS originally very difficult to take, and how it reflects on you. So yeah, for me, I would like to see more awareness of domestic violence and abuse on women with MS or other chronic illnesses.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking, isn't it? It's terrible to hear, and maybe there does need to be more awareness, more stories about some of those more difficult issues that are happening. Yeah, absolutely. And Daph, would you agree with our other two guests, or would you have anything else to add for that question?
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, more awareness leads to more support, leads to more research, leads to more treatments, leads to more everything. As you said, Rachel, even if it's bad, it's awareness, and absolutely we should give all aspects awareness.
I think it's very interesting what you were saying, Rachel, because I think having been in the sort of the world of MS for whatever it is now, 15 years, I feel like it's only something that's been started to talk about a little bit sort of the last few years, that I've seen more people sort of speaking up about, because you, especially if you have people looking after you and or a carer, that you sort of become so reliant on people, that I've seen a lot of people kind of say that they've been keeping quiet and they didn't realize until somebody actually told them on the outside that, you know, this situation that you're in is not correct. You shouldn't take all this abuse just because you having to have a carer or having to have someone look after you. And it's I think it's a really important issue to speak up about, and making sort of everyone like ourselves more so we can spot these situations. And I know that there's some training that we've been having at the MS Trust to sort of look at, you know, things where we look after forums and things like that, to be able to spot if there are situations that we need to highlight. And I think it's so important. So how about for yourselves as people with MS? Do you feel like you want to speak up about what MS is? I don't know if it's been any situations at work where people are talking about, you know, I don't know, kind of news stories or anything like that, when you kind of been wanting to go, hang on a second, this is not what MS is like, this is what MS is like for me, or just sort of in general. Rachel, maybe start.
Well, I'm slightly different, I think, because I'm not, you know, compared to Dav and to Richard, they're, it sounds to me very much more in a working environment. When I was, you know, I'm from home and things like that. But yes, I do agree with you, agree with absolutely what you say. And I knew, and I'm so little about MS because I didn't have, you know, there wasn't a family link or a sibling or parent. So it came completely out of the blue. So in a way, it's been a huge eye opener because I thought that kind of happened to other people, disability, nothing to do with me. So I do see things, you know, you look down and you see a step or something and you think, well, hang on, getting into a restaurant, and you realize just how difficult it must be for you know, a big chunk, you know, not a big, but you know, a chunk of the population being able to access spaces. So yes, things have changed. I tend to, maybe because I'm not, you know, not in the video or on air or whatever, I don't tend to talk about it that much, but I'm not afraid to say, you know, I've got MS. So I'll be interested to hear, you know, how in different environments, how, you know, how often do you speak up? Do you keep quiet? Do you let other people tell their stories for you? That kind of thing.
How about you, Duff?
Yeah, I was a bit different actually. I have been very vocal about my diagnosis. When I was hospitalized for a week when I had my first relapse, and we had a few emails coming through in work saying, "Oh, where is Dav? Where is Dav?" Obviously, they didn't know at the time, and I thought, okay, people want to know where I am. So, okay, fine. So as soon as I came out of hospital and I had my semi-formal diagnosis, waiting for the lumbar puncture and all that, I emailed work and I said, look, I want to learn about MS and I want to do it through the right way. I don't want to go down the black hole of Google, because I think Google is a great place to go, but it can be dangerous. So I said, do you want to make a documentary? And I'm happy to talk about whatever, whenever. So they agreed, and we made a documentary, an hour-long documentary, which went out on S4C last year. From the day of diagnosis all the way through to treatment, all the rest of it. And what I was so happy about is that it went beyond MS as well. I was having messages. It took me 3 days to answer every single message I'd had because I'd had so many. Obviously, I don't think it was available, unfortunately, in the rest of the UK. It was only available in Wales on iPlayer. But people could watch it with subtitles, and people who had other chronic illnesses, just general illnesses, were getting in touch saying, "Oh, I've got this. You've gone through the same emotions I have." And I was quite honest. I was quite raw. I filmed myself on the day of diagnosis. I was bawling my eyes. I was quite honest about it, but people saw it as a sort of cathartic way of dealing with their own diagnosis. And I've been lucky, and I think because I've spoken to the right people, I spoke to my consultant, which is maybe something people don't get to do. I spoke to my nurse. People don't get to do that maybe as often. I was able to grasp MS sooner. And through that, hopefully, by being vocal and doing this documentary, other people have felt benefit from it as well. And they've been able to help themselves in some way, whatever they want to take from it. And from the messages I've had, they've been able to do that. So I'm quite glad I was quite vocal from the start. Although I understand for some people it's not as easy. It's not simple. It's a life-changing thing. But I'm nosy and I want to know what's going on between these two ears. So yeah. So I think that's my answer really. No, I'm not a private person in that sense.
I thought I saw the snippets that you, because that's how we got our eyes on you, because you post. I think somebody posted a clip from it in our Facebook group and tagged you on there, and I so I haven't seen the whole thing, but I'd love to. I hope they could make it available so we could see it, because I saw the snippet from it and I thought it looked really, really good.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Thank you for doing that. How about yourself, Richard? Do you feel like you want? I mean, obviously you've done a series where you talked about it as well. How
Yeah.
sort of how private do you want to keep things, or do you want to speak up about it?
Well, I don't think I wanted to at all. I'm not very good at speaking up about anything, particularly in a kind of in work situation. So I mean, you know, for me, I can't really hide the fact that I've got something up with me. And actually, once I got a stick and started using a walking stick, it kind of was like, okay, that guy is not drunk in the middle of the day. So that made me feel slightly more sort of confident, I suppose, in a strange way. But I'd never really known quite how to deal with it, because I felt for quite a long time, and I still do to some extent. I feel like I'm sort of a tourist to disability, because I spent most of my life not disabled, and so I didn't know how to kind of just suddenly arrive and say, oh, and by the way, I'm now a voice on this subject. And I think I probably should have taken your approach, Daph, because it sounded like a sort of much more sensible way, rather than trying to sort of overthink quite how you go about kind of inserting yourself into this this sort of story, I suppose. But yeah, so but I'm always sort of looking for kind of interesting stories, and I made a series about wellness and about kind of people with autoimmune conditions and kind of the way that wellness sells them different treatments and so on. And I just thought that was an interesting enough jumping off point, but it soon became apparent that it would be probably more interesting, or there'd be something more to say about it if I put myself into it in a kind of more sort of more personal way, I suppose. And I'd always be very happy to do it again, but I sort of struggle to find the stories that are going to give you the visual element that are really going to sort of engage an audience, and that has to come first for me before I would consider whether or not this is something that I would sort of talk about myself more in, because it's not sort of my natural home, I wouldn't have said.
It is a very sort of strange situation that to sort of come out, especially to talk about it at work. When I was diagnosed, I was 29, and I was going to a lot of hospital appointments, worked in a big office, and you could sort of see that people were starting to wonder, because nothing looked like there was something wrong with me. So I was just expecting that there's going to be pregnancy rumors starting really early. So I thought I'm going to just nip it in the bud and sort of come out and say, it's MS, and I think I felt really bad afterwards, because people were really shocked and they didn't know what to say to me, and they were some were sort of really, oh, are you okay? Other people were avoiding me, and I kind of felt, oh, I just wanted not people to gossip about me thinking that I was pregnant, and then it all kind of became a bit chaotic instead. But yeah, so I don't know if there is any sort of perfect way to break it to other people, really.
Can I just add, Richard, and I'm sorry, Daph, I haven't been able to see, on a C4, because I think with Richard, in a way, I'm so glad you did that, because it's, as we do, well, I've certainly been down the rabbit hole and just thinking, look, will there be something out there? And you do tend to get sort of suckered in by thoughts that you can actually reverse this disease. And I think that's why probably your program, I think some people were hoping that you would start, some of the symptoms would go away, or if you followed this and you come out and you'd say 3 months later would flash to you and you'd say, look, it's unbelievable. I sleep better. I'm able to do this and that, and seeing that side of it and saying, yeah, it for some people, it works for them as in their mind, but it's not the panacea that we all want.
And this series is still available on The Guardian.
Oh
so you can
yes,
still watch
yeah.
it. Yes,
Yeah,
fantastic.
Guardian, YouTube, you have a look. Yeah,
We'll stick the links in the episode notes, because
I mean, so just kind of the whole way through, I'm just sort of thinking, but I'm just so not representative of this. You know, I'm not representative of wellness, which is targeted at women largely. I'm not representative of MS, which is also targeted at women largely. And you know, that's it. I just sort of really struggle with this kind of idea of speaking for kind of, and it's lovely to be able to kind of to talk about a subject which may other people might find useful or interesting, or but I always worry that I'm trying to speak for this kind of this really broad, you know, community of people who have such different life experiences, and that just putting the word, you know, the letters MS on it suddenly means that you're able to speak for this wide range of different experiences. It's just I was always very aware of that. I don't know how you deal with that. Just ignore it, maybe.
It is a really tricky situation to sort of try and speak. Like we say, we keep on using the term of a snowflake condition, because it's, you can't speak for everyone, because whatever stories we put up on our website and in social media, you always have someone going, yes, that's me, exactly me, and someone saying that's nothing like my story. Why don't you have more stories on this? And so I think it's really hard. You can never sort of please everyone within this world, but we can just keep on telling different stories, I suppose.
Absolutely. And if you get a chance to do goat yoga, I guess that's always a benefit, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah, basically. I mean, you know, it's not something that's necessarily targeted at people with MS, but it is a visual thing, and I kind of thought it would be interesting, and it was quite interesting, and I would recommend everyone do it once.
I'm intrigued. I'm sorry, Richard, I've missed this. What's the yoga story?
You can do all sorts of yoga nowadays, and goat yoga is by far, you know, it became a bit of a cliche. Goat, yeah, like goats, real goats. It became a bit of a kind of wellness cliche. I think it was sort of it went on sort of different reality TV shows, or they sort of go and do goat yoga. It's just doing yoga in a field of goats, but the idea is that these goats who are quite curious and interested might come and make friends with you and just sort of interrupt, and you can't take yourself too seriously. It allows you to laugh and relax that way. So there is kind of method to the madness, but I think it was just sort of held up as this kind of, can you believe what the wellness world is doing now? Goat yoga.
Wow. Well, contrary to what I said 5 minutes ago, I will be Googling goat yoga straight after this.
Well, we just, the podcast before this one was about altered sensations, and the pain specialist I spoke to there, she was saying distraction techniques are fantastic. So maybe having a goat running around distracting you is a good way to deal with all kinds of MS symptoms.
Or maybe for you, it should be sheep. What do you think?
Well, we have plenty of them, so maybe.
So I have a Welsh husband. I couldn't resist.
That opens me up to so many jokes. If I
know. Since your diagnosis, has the way that you report on disability changed? So I wonder if I could talk to Rachel there, please.
Yeah, and I'm actually quite embarrassed, because I think before I was diagnosed, I just never thought about disability really, or it was just over there, because there was nobody in my family who was disabled, or in our, so, you know, people I knew. And so it really was a heck, so I'm not going to swear, it was a heck of a shock when it happened to me. And I, you know, initially you know, like David, I was in hospital. That's how I received my diagnosis, and suddenly not being able to walk. I mean, thankfully, you know, most of my sensation, you know, I came back. But that was a real eye opener. And I think I've become much more aware. Well, I just have. And but you don't also, on the flip side, want to be the person that's always pointing out, you know, how able the society is, and boring your friends senseless, and your kids senseless, and your husband senseless. So I don't know what the other two find, but it is a bit of a fine line of being aware and trying to point things out, but not overdoing it.
Interesting. Yeah, so that perspective kind of shifted a little bit as well. Yeah. Daph, could I pass to you?
Absolutely. Again, I agree. It's finding that ground which is sensitive, as I said earlier, to everything and everyone, and that some people don't live as well, or people do live well, or people. It's such a different one. But as I said, I'm new, relatively 2 years now to the diagnosis, and I'm lucky that I'm not overly disabled. So that's one aspect. And then maybe we report on someone that is more disabled. There we are. That's another aspect. It's just kind of showing the whole snowflake of everyone with MS and making sure everyone is represented so you don't miss everyone. But then it's going back to another point that you said about earlier podcasts that, you get a story and then you haven't covered me. So I need to cover. I don't know where you stop and I don't know where you start, but talking about it is important and beginning the discussion, which gets to more awareness, more research, more treatment, more support. That's not a very good answer, but that's what I'm going to give you.
Of course, it's a good answer, Daph. No, it's absolutely building that awareness and I guess it's having that kind of additional viewpoint of how different MS and lots of different disabilities can be for each person. So thank you so much. And Richard, could I pass to you?
Yeah, I'm also agreeing with everyone else. That's you've all sort of said it very well. I mean, I kind of think that before I had MS, and yeah, I mean, disability was definitely sort of somewhere else, and it affected other people and so on and so forth. And I kind of got this sense that a lot of people who are disabled were it was very easy to be kind of a bit of an activist, a bit of a campaigner. That was what everyone seemed to be. And then you kind of you have mobility issues, and suddenly you're like, oh, this is why, because the world is so not designed and not sort of sympathetic to people who have mobility issues, and that's just one aspect of disability, and so I kind of totally do get that now. And I haven't really told many stories about disability before. Again, I'd love to, but I want to find the right one, and so that sometimes isn't the easiest thing. Any ideas, please send them in. But I can't remember what I was going to say, because of course that is what happens as well. But no, I mean, I tell stories about all sorts of different things, and what I kind of like is just the fact that there's a guy with a walking stick doing it, because that isn't that common. And I don't want to sort of perhaps keep talking about that, but just to be visually there with a walking stick and doing kind of as much as I can and doing kind of normal stuff and saying yes to kind of any sort of interesting visual sort of challenge, I think is good. And a number of times I've fallen over on camera. Unfortunately, it's never been at a point where we would be wanting to use the clip anyway. But if it was, I'd love to shove that in. I fall over all the time. I just trip. I walk far too fast, far faster than I'm actually able to walk, and so I fall over. And that's kind of a normal part of my life, and I would love to sort of insert that into these videos. But yeah, I haven't had the opportunity quite yet, because I'm always saying something really boring at the time.
Okay, I was 43 when I was diagnosed, so slightly older than most. I had a partner, kids. I'd already had my sort of career. How do you find it? Because you're obviously younger. You must have a lot. I find that really difficult to deal with, being younger. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I was kind of a bit set. I mean, how do you find it, David? I mean, with your colleagues, with your friends. I mean, it's quite a lot to take on.
Yeah, it's as you said earlier, it was very unexpected. And you say that disability and you see it over there somewhere, it's not with you. I think I have been extremely, extremely fortunate in that I am surrounded by quite positive people, colleagues, friends, family, partner. They've been a backbone to me in terms of the positivity they have given me the whole way through and the support. And I am I'm aware that's not true for everyone, but having been surrounded by these people, I've been able to react positively back to it and think, okay, this is what it is. Let's get on with it. Let's deal with it as is possible. And that's where I've been lucky, maybe. But I understand that's not the same for everyone else. So I've been able to deal with it much easier in that sense. And I think making the documentary was quite a selfish therapy in some ways, because I knew, oh, okay, because I'm doing a program, I can speak to this person, or I can go there, I can do quite selfish. But in a way, hopefully by doing that, it's helping others, because I've made a group of new friends now who are the similar age as I am through making the documentary and being quite vocal about it. So that's how I've been able to adapt quicker, I think. I've been lucky that I've been surrounded by positive people, and look towards the positive side wherever possible. Although it's not always when you're not feeling great and you're fatigued and you're feeling this, you're feeling that, but it's helped me anyway, personally.
The way that MS sort of affected me by and large was a really kind of gentle progression. And although I have relapsing remitting MS, apparently, I don't really get relapses, but my walking is sort of gently getting worse. But because of that, it's been such a, and I'm not really in pain, and so it's every day is pretty much like the previous day, and that has been kind of a good thing, really, I suppose, because it's just meant that I've been able to kind of take it in my stride a bit more than is sometimes possible if you suddenly, if suddenly something happens, if suddenly you're in hospital, as you both say, this is quite a sort of a bit of a shock, right? Whereas for me, I kind of knew there was something up, and it was sort of slowly affecting me a little bit more. And also, my wife was pregnant with my second child when I got diagnosed, and so that was already happening, and so we just kind of we just had to sort of adapt, I suppose, really, because there wasn't really any other option.
I think adapting is important. My partner, we had our son 11 months ago, and it's just the occasional night time having to wake up, and in the morning you think, oh, I just need that extra 20 minutes. I just need that extra. Luckily, I've got a really sympathetic partner who lets me have that 20 minutes, and I'm fine then. It's just, I think, adapting to the situation as best as you can and as well as you can. I know it sounds like a lot of waffle, but it's true. It genuinely is. Just adapt, deal and adapt as you can.
The final question that I would like to ask you, because we were spoken about, making documentaries and writing articles and doing the wellness series that you did, Richard. If you could do any sort of piece of journalism, be that, in film form or written form or what have you, what would you do if you were, I don't know, you're given a lot of money to do some whatever you wanted? Who wants to start? I'm looking at that.
Well, I would make a documentary which airs on S4C, looking at diagnosis through treatment and life now, which is what's done. But no, I think were it possible, it would be done in a broader way in which it could be more accessible to more people. Joking aside, I think it's important to see the step from A to, there is no Z, I suppose. It's just A to G, halfway through somewhere, and then and show as many aspects of MS as possible, talk about the treatments, show how much it's developed, but also being realistic to how it was and is for many people still.
Do you think you'll do like a follow-up, say in a few years, of your documentary?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it depends on a lot of factors. I suppose it depends on whether there's some massive research that's come out, or treatment, or if there's, I haven't thought about that one, Helena. I don't know. I think that's what's great about the media, is that you can do something ad hoc and just nab it and go with it. I think it depends on the timing and what's going on, not just with me, but with other people, I think. Yeah.
I think you're always waiting, aren't you, for sort of a reason to do these things, be it because there's been sort of a big bit of research that suggested this, or some big change has occurred, or there's sort of this groundswell of kind of people doing something differently, and so you're always sort of looking to kind of waiting for that moment to then sort of frame an idea around to some extent. I mean, I've not long finished a piece about MS, so I just answer that one, but in a warmer place.
Nice. With more goats. Oh.
More goats. No, there was the right amount of goats already.
And how about yourself, Rachel?
Again, very much agree. And I also think it's quite interesting because I think you both, the journalists, are visual. And I think that is such an effective way to talk about MS. But on the flip side, and I don't know if you find this, a story like Epstein-Barr virus and possible links. And I mean, how many photos, though, or how many descriptions of a cells and, attacking the myelin? Sometimes it is difficult, doesn't it? And also MS is quite a complicated subject, isn't it? When somebody asks you and they want to know in a minute or two, what is MS? I mean, it's really difficult to wrap it up, isn't it? And to say that, on the flip side, I think and as it's been very much pointed out here, it's been a huge neurological success story. Compare MS and the treatments that are available to, say, Parkinson's disease. And so I think there's a lot to be hopeful for, but that's very difficult to tell to somebody who's just been newly diagnosed, isn't it? Yeah. So I do think I've found that people, and fair enough, busy lives, they probably don't want to read as much about MS. They'd like to see it, which is why I think this is so fantastic with social media and being able to put up, short spurts or, a documentary that's very watchable rather than reams of kind of, quoting scientific publications. So no, the answer is, I don't know. But I think short, punchy, kind of what the MS Trust does too. That's kind of the way forward, visual.
Nicely done at the end there, Rachel.
I
know what you're doing.
Should have seen how much we had to pay Rachel before the podcast, honestly. Yeah.
Obviously, listening to all the podcasts, and please do keep us informed of your future projects, be it about MS or disability, because it's always very interesting to follow what's going on in the world of media.
What would you say to anyone living with MS who would potentially like to do a job like yours, who would like to get into the media? Richard, do you have some thoughts on this?
I have no idea. Yes. I just think that the times are slowly changing, and that people and companies, and I think that, I can only speak from my experience at The Guardian, but there is a bit more of awareness about kind of people with different stories to tell and with different perspectives, telling normal stories, the stories that don't necessarily focus on any of this stuff. And I think that I would hate to think that there were people who think that they wouldn't be able to do it because of it. And people have all sorts of different issues with MS, and some of them are hugely challenging, not least, in terms of fatigue and just not, and physically not being able to do a lot of stuff. And I just think that there should be still space for that voice to tell something that they care about and they feel is important to talk about. And I'm not sort of necessarily saying that people should all be sort of campaigning journalists, sort of trying to argue for more attention and more money in their own area, but that they have a different way of looking at the world because of what's happened to them. And I think that that's something that it would be lovely to think wouldn't hold people back anymore, like I'm sure it has done in the past. Go for it.
That's brilliant advice. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, it's I guess it's just thinking about it without the barriers that potentially once existed, and that actually there are lots and lots of jobs within the media that are accessible, and that you will bring that unique personal experience, that lived experience of something that maybe colleagues won't have. So no, thank you so much. Rachel or Daph, would you like to add anything about getting into the media?
Okay, I'll go. About getting into the media, I just think it's much. And oh God, I sound like the old lady here. But when I obviously tried to get into media, there was no internet. It was very much, it was radio, TV, and it was print. Which now I think, for better for worse, I think social media, everybody has a voice and everybody can put it out there, which I think can be hugely positive, because each person gets a chance to say, as we've said, about our lived experience. And, on the one hand, you get the kind of, the MS person who, regularly climbs, say, Mount Everest or runs a marathon a day. So you've got that. And then you've got the other person who will say, look, I got up this morning and I can't get myself out of bed. I'm just tired. And they might even be the same age. So I think that's the good thing, is there are a lot out there. But I think, as David pointed out, social media can also be really tough to navigate, especially if you're newly diagnosed and somebody says, look, try goat yoga. Yeah, I can sprint now. Or here's a cure, and you just send in whatever, and your MS will be reversed. So it's a curse, but also I think it's actually more of a positive thing. People's voices are out there. So to anybody who wants to get into the media, I would think, get out there. What would you suggest? Everybody reading a lot and then writing or copying people's style, or why it's appealing, why it's good, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And there's definitely that opportunity there. I wonder if I could, pass that one on to Daph.
Yeah, I agree. It's great that we're all agreeing today. I'm going to take a line from you, Richard. Just go for it.
Yeah.
If you can and you're able to and you feel well enough, go for it. Why let MS stop you? Do it. Although a piece of advice I was given early on, which has stuck with me, someone told me to be kind to yourself. And I do that if I feel I'm fatigued, as you said, Rachel, or if I feel, today's not the day. If you work with a sympathetic employee, I'm sure they should at least be sympathetic towards you. And hopefully that's the case nowadays. So yeah, go for it. Don't let MS stop you if you feel you can do it.
And I really do think that employers should be and must be kind of much better at working around people who have these sorts of issues, and being aware and sympathetic to having to do things slightly differently. And there should be space for that. And more, I believe there is kind of this growing awareness within the industry of the importance of getting these voices and trying to find ways of them being able to tell stories just like anyone else,
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a story to share, the MS Trust is always looking for people to do guest blogs and to share their stories, video diaries, what have you, because we do feel like the more stories we share, the more diverse picture we can paint of what life with MS is. So do send them in. Excellent. Well, I want to say a big thank you to all our guests. Yes, thank you for taking the time to chat to us today. It's been very interesting. And hope to speak to you soon again, and let us know what's going on if you're doing any other interesting projects, be there goats involved or not. Now, if this was a commercial podcast, here is where there would be an advert. But as we're a charity, we don't do that. So instead, we'd like to take this opportunity to tell you all about our own resources.
On our website, we've got lots of stories about people's lives with MS. So if you head to mstrust.org.uk/news stories, you can read all kinds of different personal stories, and you can even filter down to topics so you can find what's relevant to you. So that's really useful if you want to, for example, see about a particular treatment or a particular experience of doing something. You can filter there and see what some of the MS community have to say about that subject.
And like I mentioned in the podcast interview there, if you have a story to submit yourself, we'd love to hear from you. So there's links on that page as well on how you can get involved in sharing your own story. I love this format. It was really interesting to chat to everyone in this way. I did wonder if they were going to start interviewing each other with so many people from the media, but I thought it was a really interesting discussion. I feel, especially since, like you mentioned at the start there, with MS Awareness Week coming up, we will start getting those questions about why are not more people with MS represented in the media, and why is it not being talked about a bit more. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens in this MS Awareness Week, if we will see some more stories in the sort of normal press.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we could get some more representation of what life's really like for MS in mainstream media, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Yeah, I don't know about you, Helena, but I think I might be off to try some goat yoga fairly soon.
Yes, I can really recommend, and we'll put the link, like I said, in the show notes to have a little look at Richard's wellness series, because I thought it was very interesting, sort of a skeptic's guide to the wellness industry. It's a very interesting thing, and we'll put the links to the other contributors things as well, because Rachel has written some very interesting articles, and obviously we're hoping to be able to watch David's documentary on sort of non-Welsh TV as well. That would be very interesting to see. But meanwhile, he has shared his own story on the website as well, and there is a video of him. So if you want to see more, you can follow that as well. Now, we're going to need your help, actually, because in the near future, we're doing a podcast about smoking in MS. Now, this is an interesting topic, and a lot of people can feel quite strongly about smoking. It's very hard to give up for people who have tried, but there is a lot of research into smoking and MS. So what we're looking for a person living with MS who has stopped smoking and maybe noticed some differences in what it does to your symptoms. So if this applies to you, we'd love to hear from you. How about dropping us an email on comms@mstrust.org.uk, or you can even leave us a voice note on WhatsApp on 0745 83 03 326.
And if you do have any further questions about MS, we are here for you. You can call our inquiry service helpline. That's available Monday to Friday, apart from UK bank holidays, and that's from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Outside of these hours, you can also leave us a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So go ahead and call the inquiry service helpline. That's 0800 032 3839. Or alternatively, you can email us at ask@mstrust.org.uk.
And since this is all about the media, let's talk a little bit about the social media. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. I believe we might even be venturing out into the world of TikTok, so come and find us on there as well. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and in other places where you would normally listen to your podcasts. We would love it if you spread the news about the podcast, share it with your friends, and, you know, like everyone I keep on saying, like and subscribe, because then you'll get it straight into the little notification when there's a new one out. And we love to hear what you're thinking about the podcast as well. So if you have any opinions about it, please get in touch and let us know. And then finally, we would like to say a big thank you to Anne Chapman Audio for the theme song to this podcast. And off to do goat yoga now then.
Yeah, let's go.
Bye.